Help support AMTV by becoming a patron, an AMTV staff member, and following us over on Twitter.
Hello, very good morning and welcome to BBC One on Saturday the 4th of October with a brand new look.
Hi there guys, it's Adam Martyn here, and today we're going to be talking about the BBC One balloon. And I've got to be honest, I wasn't expecting to be talking about this in like a present day context, because I thought the BBC One balloon, as I think many of us had thought, had been relegated to the annals of TV history, because to many a surprise on the BBC website itself, this popped up saying famous BBC One balloon to take the air once again. Very exciting news indeed. So let's have a look at what this article has to say. It says, a hot air balloon made famous by the BBC will be inflated for the first time in decades. The orange and red globe was manufactured in Bristol by Cameron Balloons before being seen on BBC One's idents for 5 years. It was retired in 2002 and moved through various storage sites until it was given to a balloon hobbyist group. So just a bit about the ident. Yes, this was introduced in 1997 in October to coincide with the then BBC corporate rebrand that happened. And of course, this BBC logo you see here, this is the one I think many of my generation are familiar with, the famous slanted BBC logo that had been in use largely since the 1960s. Finally disappeared, giving way to this more upright, if you like, more streamlined approach. And this would be the BBC's corporate logo for the better part of the next, well, nearly 25 years before it again shifted in 2021. And the balloons themselves, it's funny because I remember even at the time being a little kid and like getting into idents and stuff like that. I know a lot of people for the longest time didn't really rate these idents. I think at the time, you know, people had become so used to the BBC just having some kind of globe as their standard ident. Again, that had been the norm since the 1960s, and that had continued through the 70s and the 80s. And whilst the globe still does feature, obviously you can see it on the balloon itself, the fact it wasn't like, you know, centering the screen, it's more of a real life location, it's not completely computer generated, it was new ground for BBC One at the time. And like with any new thing, people were a bit hesitant, a bit resistant. But over the last 25 years, I would argue that the balloon has actually gained a lot of love. You know, it's gained a lot of love amongst the ident community, a lot of love amongst people, and it holds a lot of nostalgia for that time in the late 90s, early 2000s. Continuing on, it says its former pilot wrote to the BBC and the Bristol balloon collectors were given permission to inflate it again. Mark Lockwood was the creative director at Virgin Airship and Balloon Company and flew the balloon at different places across the UK to film the idents for 4 months in 1997. 4 months! Goodness me, because yeah, this balloon popped up in a variety of places all around the UK, not just England. It appeared in Scotland, Wales, Northern Ireland, you name it. They include various pictures throughout this article. Here's one you can see the balloon being moved. And I mean, I think people forget, balloons are massive things, man. They're very delicate as well. You got to take good care of them. So I hope that this has been stored well. Mark Lockwood says a lot of people thought it was computer generated, but it wasn't. Every shot was absolutely taken on location, and the agency selected the shots that they wanted. The balloon was designed by the agency lambie-nairn to stand out as it flew across the sky. So a touch on that computer-generated stuff. I can see what he means because, you know, again, in the late 1990s, CGI was becoming a lot more commonplace on television as a whole, not just in programs, but in idents as well. And a lot of TV channels, both the terrestrial and satellite, were incorporating CGI or computer-generated work into their idents. So props to the BBC at the time for going for, you know, a more authentic approach, because it looks great. Knowing that this balloon is real, flying about the place, I think just adds a whole level of depth to the ident sequence as a whole. And of course, lambie-nairn were the agency that designed it, headed and started, of course, by the famous Martyn lambie-nairn, who sadly passed away a few years ago. If you don't know who Martyn lambie-nairn is, basically his name, his face, his everything is tied to so many iconic television idents, not just in the UK, but around the world. Some you might know, some stuff for BBC Two, especially in the 1990s. He was the brains, or his agency was the brains behind that. Channel 4's logo, that is still the essence, the core of that logo is still being used today. 40 years later. So yeah, Martyn lambie-nairn has a pretty big role to play in the British TV industry, particularly with idents and logos and such like. Here's another picture of Liam and Dan Whitlock on the left and Matt Joyce on the right, and they are now in the care of the balloon. And just like, obviously we can't see the full thing here, but you can see the patterns of the globe emerging there, and it looks to be in pretty decent shape. Like, it's got a lot of vibrancy still to its colours. There might be like natural aging and stuff, but it looks to be in pretty good nick. Mr. Lockwood, the original pilot, said at the end of its life, it was put into storage, and then the Virgin Balloon Company ceased to be in 2002. Right, so the company ended not long after the idents ended. The balloons were distributed to various preservation groups and museums, and we lost track of where it went along with several others. It's not like the tomb of Tutankhamun, it just had been misplaced somewhere. Because when they're packed up, it's hard to know exactly what's in the bag. I can imagine that. Balloons are big things, man, and again, they'll have to be folded up, etc. So I guess you're relying on paperwork, documentation and stuff. And if this company folded and then, all these balloons were distributed around the place, I guess at the time, the internet was around, but I guess if this wasn't logged properly, it could get lost. The British balloon collectors will inflate the aircraft for the first time in 20 years this weekend in a field near Bath to test its condition. Well, that's exciting. It's saying this weekend, so this coming weekend, so that'll be sometime either Saturday the 4th or Sunday the 5th of March. I mean, by the time you're seeing this may have happened. But if you knew about this and you're in the Bath area, you might want to maybe find out where they're doing this so you can see this in action. I sincerely hope that it is in a flyable condition, because imagine seeing that on your screen again, the BBC One balloon. How iconic. Mr. Lockwood said, it depends how it has been stored and where it has been stored. Polyurethane coating can be degraded by mold or mildew. The most important thing will be making sure it was kept dry. I mean, again, you'd hope that this would have been kept in a decent condition because, naturally things degrade anyway, you could say over time, even with some of the best preservation, just because, that is the nature of life. But I sincerely hope this is in a flyable condition. So I guess we'll find out very soon. The British balloon collectors plan to tether the aircraft at the Midlands Air Festival in Alcester, Warwickshire in June, if it is in good condition. Oh, well, there you go. So if you're near that area in Warwickshire in June, and if you want to attend the Midlands Air Festival, you may very well get the chance to see the BBC One balloon fly again for the first time in over 20 years. Honestly, it is just really exciting because, again, over the decades, I'd say the balloon idents have gotten a lot more appreciation from people, and I think for the chance for people to see it fly, for those of us who were kids at the time or grew up with this or remember this, it'll be very nostalgic to see the balloon go again over 25 years later from its original airing, and I think it'll just be a cool spectacle overall. It's a shame they couldn't find this or restore it for the BBC's 100th last year. That would have been a really cool thing. I mean, I know a lot of us wanted them to do for their idents sort of like a retrospective thing where maybe they honour their past idents throughout their history. They didn't do that. They went for a more, some would say, generic approach for the 100 years, but, it's each to their own. But all in all, I'm glad it's been found. I'm glad it still exists. It's not been destroyed, because 20 years is a long time. And in that time, a lot of things go missing. A lot of things can be destroyed. In terms of my thoughts of the balloon idents, I must admit, when I was a lot younger, not necessarily when I was growing up, but when I first started getting into idents more and more, I didn't really rate these ones too much. I think I just found them a bit plain, just the whole, it's a balloon hovering in the sky. But I mean, looking at it now, with a bit more experience and a bit more of an analytical eye, I mean, first of all, the landscapes of these idents are just beautiful. I mean, surveying the various locations throughout the UK, England, Wales, Northern Ireland, Scotland, etc., there are so many gorgeous locations, and the way this was filmed is beautiful. Again, remember back then in the late 90s, there were no drones, because this could easily be done with drone shots now and stuff like that. So the filmmaking that went into this must have been immense at the time, and like they said, a 4-month operation to get all of the shots that they needed. It's honestly just quite incredible. So some would say, yeah, maybe it's not the most interesting, visually, if you're not into, your visual vistas and stuff like that. But the soundtrack to a lot of these really captivated us as well. It really does. It's an ident that works, or, a motif that works in several ways. And, of course, this is the last BBC One ident set to feature a globe in any form. Obviously, it's on the balloon, because after this would come the rhythm and movement idents, and I've already done a whole series about those. But that, of course, abandoned the globe. They proved to be very controversial at the time. Controversial in the sense that people didn't like them because change is bad. But yeah, the balloon idents I think hold a special place, not just for me. It was some of the first BBC idents I ever remember seeing, because I'm a child of the, I was born in 1996, so I vaguely remember these, maybe from 2000, 2001. So yeah, they hold a very special place for me. And also during this ident set, it marked a lot of firsts at the time. One that immediately springs to mind is this is when BBC News 24 came around, 24-hour broadcasting on BBC One. And it was this ident set that would, bring that in and see an end to the old classic close downs, if you like, national anthem, clocks and all. But let me know what you think down below in the comments. Are you excited that the BBC One balloon is taking flight once again? Are you going to try and get to this festival in June to hopefully see it fly? Fingers crossed it's in a good condition. Yeah, and what are your thoughts on the BBC One balloon idents as a whole? Let me know in the comments down below. That's all for this video though. Thank you very much for watching. As always, if you enjoyed it, please do leave a like. It really does help us out and we do appreciate it. And we'd love to have you subscribe to us here at the AMTV network. We'd always love to have new people aboard. We do have 3 channels as well. There's this one. We have the AMTV Now channel, which focuses on music. Like now, that's what I call music specifically. And we have AMTV Who, which, as you might have guessed, is themed all around Doctor Who. So if those things pique your interest, go and subscribe to them as well. In the meantime, I've been Adam Martyn from AMTV. Thank you for joining me, and I'll see you next time. Thank you to our patrons for helping to support the show, and a special thank you to Macra, Hux Media, Ben Freeman, Ethan Carberry-Holt, The Broken Kitsumanoid, Globe of Reviews, Derek Chambers, Sean Knock, DSTV New Zealand, and Dord Khan, our AMTV staff members.